In Galatians chapter 3, verse 19, Paul says that the law was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. The Gnostics understood this to mean that the law of the Old Testament had been given not directly by God, but by a kind of intermediary on God's behalf. This would give rise to views like Marcion's, in which the God of the Old Testament is a lesser and indeed somewhat malevolent figure. And in Ephesians we read, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. Here we find an echo of a key theme in Gnosticism, the existence of the archons, invisible rulers of the heavenly realm that stand between us and God. According to the esoteric worldview that was widely held in antiquity, there were celestial principalities and powers that mediated between the one God far above and the world of matter and appearances here below. The Gnostics and the Orthodox Christians disagreed not so much about whether these powers existed, but about whether they were fundamentally good or evil. In any event, Paul was cited as a major source among the Gnostics. Valentinus, the greatest and most influential of all Gnostic teachers, traced his spiritual lineage to Paul. The distinction between the soul and the spirit may seem academic or obscure to us, but it was not so to the Gnostics. Unlike today, when no one seems to have anything more than the vaguest idea of what these words even mean, the distinction between the soul and spirit was crucial in early Christianity. For the Gnostics and for the early Christians in general, the soul was the whole of the mental and emotional complex that makes up our inner life. The closest equivalent we have for this concept in modern English is psyche, and it's no coincidence that when the word soul appears in most English translations of the New Testament, the Greek word it is translating is psyche. The spirit, by contrast, was pure consciousness, the self, the true I, what other religions have called by such names as the Atman or Buddha nature. This distinction was extremely important to Valentinus and indeed to most of the Gnostics, who separated humanity into three fundamental types. The first and the lowest are the carnal or fleshly ones, sometimes called the hylic from the Greek heli or matter. Those who are oriented toward the external world of things and toward physical desires such as food and sex. Next come psychic individuals. This has nothing to do with psychic powers as we speak of them today, but rather points to a middle orientation between the body and the spirit. Such people have begun to awaken from the dream of ordinary life, but have not awakened entirely. The Gnostics tended to see ordinary Christian believers, those who lived by faith rather than knowledge, as psychic individuals. Finally, there are the spiritual ones, who are also sometimes called the pneumatic from the Greek pneuma, spirit. These have transcended their bonds to the world and are totally free. They are beyond earthly attachments and are no longer tempted or distracted by them, at least in theory. It may seem arrogant and exclusive to sort people into three different classes, and no doubt some of the Gnostics must have made it look very much that way. A tendency toward elitism was one of the chief flaws of Gnostic teaching and no doubt contributed to its downfall. Even so, it's not entirely wrong, especially if we realize that this is essentially a process of self-selection. You yourself choose the category you will fall into simply by virtue of what interests you. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. If you are oriented toward the external world and preoccupied with the satisfactions of the body, you are a fleshly person, no matter how well-born or well-educated you are. If you are drawn toward the unseen, toward the realms of the divine that seem to haunt us even as they elude us, you are more likely to be a spiritual or pneumatic individual, or at least have the potential to become one. There is one work by Valentinus whose title alone survives. It was called On the Three Natures, and according to the ancient author who mentions it, it contained the first discussion of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as the three persons of the Trinity. This fact shows how complex and contradictory the whole question of Christian origins can be. Apparently, the doctrine of the Trinity, the linchpin of Orthodox Christianity, was first formulated by an alleged heretic.